Happy that you are all here. Today we will talk about Excel, planning in Excel, and when it starts limiting your growth. My name is Pieter van Nevel. I work at Solventure for more than 10 years now. I have been supporting APS implementations at more than 30 customers. I have seen many Excels being replaced by advanced planning systems. And today I would like to talk a bit about not just my observations, but Solventure's observation on this matter. And we hope that you will have a few takeaways from this session. We would like to start with listening to you, basically. So we would like to understand where you are today. We are with a big group today, and I'm pretty sure that some of you are still planning in Excel. Maybe others already made the move and are just interested by the topic. But so let's see. Then we would like to discuss when Excel became the standard. So we will talk a bit about Excel planning in Excel might not be the worst thing to do, but it's an issue when it becomes a limit to your growth. We will discuss a bit of the warning signs that you and we observe when you get to that point that you need to look into more advanced tooling. It's not an easy road, so let's also discuss what are potential challenges along the way throughout the journey to get the journey started. And we also would like to make it a bit more tangible and discuss how we do that together with our customers. For this first part, I would like to rely a bit on you. I can see that some are already answering. So the question we would like to ask is how much of your planning process still relies on Excel? And I can see that Excel is on the upper hand right now. So many answers on the left of the screen, which is probably the reason that you are attending this webinar. So still 7 companies working almost entirely on Excel. Some have supplemented or complemented Excel already with some planning tools. Then we have 5 people where it's a kind of a mix between the two. And then we have just a few who are working mostly on APS already. So I would say, or let's say I would conclude from this that we have a very relevant crowd or audience today.
I think I shared with you, Peter, that I was surprised. I saw a lot of mid-sized to larger companies with quite some complexity. And don't ask me why, but I would have expected more companies to have invested in more professional planning software already. And I think one of our questions will indeed also be to figure out how did we end up here? What are some key hurdles to move to the right? But that's what we'll talk about.
Exactly. And let us switch back to the slides. Second topic is so we wanted to talk a bit about is it necessarily a bad thing that you are using Excel? And our opinion says no. So Excel could be a good solution for certain planning challenges, and it's also in a way normal that when people or when companies start growing and the planning function also starts maturing, that people just grab Excel for their first steps in that planning journey for very obvious reasons. So it's very accessible. Everybody has access to Excel. It's a fairly low cost. It's not an additional investment that you need to request or get funded. It's very flexible. Maybe the key reason why people like to work with Excel is that you can tailor it according to what you truly need as a professional, or what you or how you like to work, let's say. And it's also a very short ramp up period, so very easy to start with. And let me repeat myself again. So Excel itself is not the problem. It only becomes a problem when the complexity grows faster than the tool can support it. And that's with any tool, that's with any system. Just with Excel, you kind of run into the limitations very quickly, of course. Yeah? So let us start there. And before we continue, so we've seen that many of you are currently planning in Excel, and we would like to understand on the day-to-day business, what is your major challenge when you are planning in Excel? And let me quickly switch back to our Mentimeter. So you can just stay in the Mentimeter and share with us. It's a free field, so feel free to text in your own words what your major challenge is today when you are planning in Excel. So it's indeed prone to errors. So people can make mistakes easily. There are not a lot of validation checks. Too slow. Yeah. So when complexity increase, one of the drivers of complexity is volumetry, and then it tends to become slow very fast. Again, mistakes. Visibility and overview. It's a table format. Yeah. So getting to the right level of visibility and KPIs is more difficult. Consistency and setup. So everybody's using kind of their own way of working, which also leads to difficulty in consolidating the data from the different regions. I see that a lot. Lack of visibility, change of the operator. So that's a big problem when people leave or change roles. It's very hard to hand over a very tailored Excel. Exception handling is difficult. Lack of integration. So many challenges. I see there are some themes that come back. And let me switch back to the presentation. We prepared a bit of the science, and this is also described in one of our blogs that we launched recently. So if we would look at the top signs that people have outgrown Excels, it will be about that people are really struggling with having multiple versions of the truth. So if you have a meeting where you are discussing the demand outlook, it's a meeting of 60 minutes, but you spend 50 minutes discussing why your version is different than mine, then that's not really efficient. Time spent on collecting data instead of making decisions, a very common one. I've also seen that in your responses. Running scenarios, it's becoming even more important these days, but also it stays very complex and difficult in Excel. Manual updates, firefighting. If your portfolio is getting bigger, disruptions coming faster, it becomes very difficult to plan all of that in a very manual way. And so you would need additional exception reporting or guidance. Depends on key users. If people switch roles, it's difficult to hand over, and a lack of scalability. If additional sites come in, new portfolios or product families come in, it's very difficult to scale that. Yeah. So I think what we have observed in the last 20 years is more or less similar as what you are struggling with today. Now, we know where you are today, but let us also see where you believe you need to be moving forward, to see whether you would like to stay more on the left or whether you have ambitions to move more to the right. And I am not expecting everybody to put themselves on the utmost right side of the screen, because as I mentioned, the system needs to support the complexity that you are facing. The more you have to evolve to the right, but in some businesses, it's okay to be less advanced. But here we see clearly a tendency that people would like to be more on the right side. Yeah. So I think we have established the fact that people are currently more on the left, and we have a clear ambition to move to the right.
Yeah, and to maybe comment on what could be a hybrid mode discussion I had with companies in the past is like, yeah, if, for instance, if you have a good operational planning layer, a good master planning layer, which can capture a lot of complexity like production wheels and capacity constraints and so on. So if you have a solid master planning layer, depending on the complexity of your process and your portfolio, yeah, then in the end, in simple production sites, yeah, the scheduling could still be done in Excel. You don't necessarily need the full APS suite for all parts of the company.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Bram. And so when we work together with companies to then move or to make the switch, let's say from Excel to APS, these are the typical arguments or things that people are looking for when they make that move. Yeah? So people really see it as an opportunity to combine multiple stakeholders in the organization and to work from the same plan. So I I've had actually many transformation programs that got the name one plan or one team, and that I think that says it all. That instead of having all of these scattered plans that people send over email, that they really want to move to one and the same plan. At the same time, making decisions not isolated or focused on just optimizing one KPI, but making them more on a holistic matter where you can directly see impact on what on the service side, on the cost side, on the cash side. That's typically also one of the things that companies look for when they make that switch and what they focus on as well. People are used to having planning there to just drive the operational execution, but when people make that switch, they also want to be prepared for growth and they want also planning to spot opportunities that can enable or accelerate business growth. Adding sustainability metrics as part of the decision making, not spending time on discussing data issues, but having a strong integration layer, data quality, governance process in place that people know we can trust the data and we can focus on the added value. That plans truly drive actions instead of sitting in PowerPoint decks. And then also that people tend to look then also for more horizontal integration within their value chain and also collaborate more extensively with customers and suppliers. Important to add there is that you cannot look at an APS implementation just as a tooling upgrade from Excel to APS. You really need to see it as the opportunity to connect planning across the business and to also achieve all of these ambitions, or at least a couple of them. Does that mean that we can just give you, all of you, the roadmap on how you need to move from Excel to APS? Unfortunately, not. Yeah. So I think different companies require also different approaches. And if we would look at companies which are currently planning in Excel, we could look at kind of a simple way to classify them on the quadrant that you see on the left. Yeah? And depending on where a company is in that visual, we will also tailor the roadmap to go from Excel to APS in a different way. Yeah? So let me walk you through that. We like to look at what is the maturity of the planning processes at hand at the company. Yeah? Are these processes existing or not existing? Is it mainly planner driven that every planner just does what he or she has been doing in the last 20, 30 years because they are used to it? Or is there a clear process and governance in place that depict how the company should do planning? Is there a centralized team that is supporting the local organizations, let's say? The other axis is about how standardized is the Excel. On the one extreme, you have every planner or every user has their own built Excel file, and it's a black box for the rest of the organization, and they just hand over their plans through email to the next in line. But you also see companies where they have invested time and energy in building more centralized and aligned Excels where people are following the same structure, are leveraging the same data foundation to base their planning decisions on. And depending on where companies are in this quadrant, we will also adjust our roadmap according to that. Yeah? So companies who are more to the right typically have already a data foundation available. And then we should also spend less time on harmonizing the data, standardizing the data structures, etc. Companies who are typically at the top of the graph, they have already spent time on defining the process. People are used to having a central governance in place. And then there is also less need for process design, mapping, and definition for the future state of working. Yeah. And in general, if people are more to the top right corner, then also typically less change management is required. And I would even dare to say that companies on the top right quadrant, if we would do or work on an APS implementation, that it's almost half of the duration or effort as for companies on the bottom left. Yeah? And that's not that these people need to invest less. No, they have already invested in all that pre-work. Before they have invested time in process work, have invested time in data work before the APS solution. Yeah? It does not mean that you should be at the top right corner to move to APS. That's not what I'm trying to say here. It does mean that depending on where you are, we need to tailor that roadmap together with you. So the more you are at the bottom left of the graph, I would say the more we need to spend time and energy on change, process, and data. But on the other side, also the bigger the benefits that we can unlock because you have not spent a lot of time on centralizing the processes and the data structures behind that. Yeah. And I would say we would be curious to understand what your starting point is. Let me switch back to our Mentimeter. There we go. So normally you should be able to rate your company on two axes, on the process maturity and on the level of Excel standardization. And then we should see on average where this group is situated on this quadrant.
It seems to be making an average, Pieter.
It is making an average, yes.
Okay.
Maybe for next time we can look into scatter plots. At least we can see it evolve over the quadrant, right? So I think there are quite some people who have already invested time and energy on the process maturity. We see it now coming down a bit, but I would say on the horizontal axis it remains somewhere at the 3 or 4 range out of 10 on Excel standardization.
What that triggers with me, Pieter, is my observation is like when it's about S&OP as a process, a lot of companies say, okay, no, let's already start doing the process and let's start doing a demand review and a supply review. So I see a lot of process Yeah. People starting with the process and trying the process out, and then tools could potentially follow later. I still consider that to be a risk, because if you don't really have a reliable forecasting solution or good capacity planning tools, and the process becomes cumbersome, and you get only one chance at that. If you fail, people have a long memory. But I see it less on operational planning. So on operational planning, I don't see either. It's like every planner has its own Excel, and there is no standardization, or there is a standard solution in place. There maybe it's also a bit harder to standardize planning based on a standard Excel.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so, like for S&OP, I think you can get away with it. So I have seen companies do that successfully, where they designed a roadmap where they would first work on the processes. So they would go from bottom left to top left, let's say. Then they worked on a sort of a centralized Excel. They leveraged that as a sort of a prototype for an APS, and then after a year they moved to an APS. Yeah. But it's not that it was different decisions or how should I say, different projects. No, it was one project, and in that project they phased it like that. So I could see that work. I also understand what you say, that for operational planning, sometimes it's better to just move directly to APS.
Yeah. And if you have an Excel-driven S&OP process, one of the typical challenges will be, I just came off a call with a company that was in that situation, like, but how do we couple back the decisions from the S&OP into the more operational planning? So that's again where stronger tools can also help to more automatically then connect different planning layers.
Yes, indeed. And so we have seen that most of you are more on the left. The ambition is to go to the right. You are facing a lot of challenges, is what we have seen. We also understand that your starting point is, on average, that the Excels, it's more of a forest of Excels. There is some process maturity, but we would then be very interested to also understand from you what is then actually preventing you to reach your future state. Why is it that you are then still running the business on Excel and that you are not yet on an APS solution? Might be a tougher question. Not willing to leave flexible Excel. So that's really a change question or challenge. I would say as long as the cost of staying where you are is higher than the cost to move to an APS, there should always be a business case to also convince people to step away from the flexible Excel and move to a more professional and centralized process. Tool selection before maturity, that's also a common one. It's if the team is not already aligned or educated on how such a process should look like, it's very difficult to run a tool selection. And that's also where we actively guide customers to first reach that maturity or that solid understanding of what it takes and how a best practice process works. Processes are in place for a long time. That's a bit related to the first one, I would say. So that's a change challenge. Budget mindset. So that's more of a return on investment challenge. How can you prove that with making that shift that you can bring business value and fast? Buy-in of all regions, workload, understanding what is the best APS solution for your business. I understand that it's very difficult for you to assess. Just know that there are experts out there who can guide you. First priority, ERP update. That's a very common one. And maybe we have been too modest in supply chain planning. I have done projects where we did ERP and APS at the same time, where maybe the cost of an ERP was 90% of the total cost, but the business value was 90% coming out of the APS update. So I would be happy to help you share that message to the board, and then priorities should be clear if you ask me. Not having a financial planning yet. Process is still evolving, not stable. Master data availability. So quite some things in between you and your ambitions or objectives. Thank you for sharing all of these. So what tool to choose? I think it's one that we have seen a lot now. Resistance to change. I also see a couple of cards which are about, okay, we don't really know what the capabilities are of an APS. I would say these are easy things to overcome. I will come back to that later as well, but sometimes it's better to sort of doing a proof of concept that it makes it very tangible for your team to see how their day-to-day process could be covered in an APS solution that could bring a lot of trust before making the investment.
Yeah, and what the triggers with me, Peter, is in general, I see there is really a lack of knowledge on how best practice planning processes look like and how that can be supported within APIs. Again, I came off a call with a company that has decided to implement an APS, but they basically have no clue on what different planning levels and hierarchies are and how these things interact and how to properly set up demand planning. So I think there is in general, I think there's a huge lack of knowledge both on the best practice planning approaches and on how systems can properly support that. In general, I also see that a lot of supply chain people, it's doubling. Like I think are too cautious, and so the value of improved planning is easier. We always work with the triangle of service, cost, and cash. So it should not be that difficult to come up with a business case. But sometimes we seem to be very reluctant to also claim proper tools for us as supply chain people to deal with all the complexities and volatilities around us. So I think that's a second common one. And and again, certainly if you standardize, certainly operational planning, the individual planners will have less flexibility than they had in their original Excel. So through a combination of education and showing them the value, also explaining to the organization why we want to make that step. Those are a couple of things it triggers on my side.
Yeah, makes it again very tangible, Bram. Thank you. So, and also from my perspective, to make it a bit more tangible to the audience. So, if we guide companies in this shift from Excel to APS, we like to understand very well what the current situation is of the company. So I mentioned it earlier. There is not just one roadmap that would fit any company. What is important is that everybody involved, all stakeholders, understand what the current stage is, what the specific complexities are, what the potential pitfalls and challenges are, and that we then tailor a roadmap that is specifically made so that you can either mitigate those challenges and pitfalls or just avoid them in general. And these type of roadmaps are typically organized around 4 dimensions. So the tooling dimension is simply just one of them. So that's the APS implementation. Next to that, there's also a data dimension. I've been to Gartner symposium in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. I think 60-70% of all keynotes were about data. It was a bit in the context of AI and how AI will disrupt planning or enable autonomous planning. Let me put it like that. But that data, even more than in the past, is so critical to make that shift and to enable that. So data, I cannot say it enough. Understanding what is needed from the ERP systems and in general the system landscape, mapping that to the APS solution, ensuring that gaps in the current data structure are identified and filled, and that there's a governance process in place to constantly ensure that the data quality is of the right specs. That's a must now. Next to tool and data, there's of course also process and change. So don't just copy the Excel forest process and put it in an APS solution, but try to understand very well where your current planning maturity is, what within your industry is the best practice, could be a strong objective or ambition, and then also designing it in such a way that you will get there in 3, 6, or 12 months in time. Yeah. While you're doing that, you will change ways of working. You will maybe change specific roles, consolidate roles, create new roles, and all of these things require also attention on the change perspective. And change is about educating people. It's about identifying where the changes will be in the organization, documenting them, and also making sure that you have a strong plan to keep those people with all noses in the same direction, that people understand the purpose of this, why we're doing that, and that they can also see how they will fit in that future way of working. Yeah. And then next to that also, ensure that you understand at the start what the value case is that you want to achieve. Yeah. So I think I've seen it a couple of times in Mentimeter that the challenge to get to an APS is maybe the budget or the investment or unlocking that. Well, there are there are ways to assess bottom up and understand what the total value is that can be unlocked. Huh? And also there, don't hesitate to reach out to experts to help you there who have done that multiple times. Yeah. And defining a business case, putting it in the freezer and not look at it for 30 years, that's not what you should do. So also actively monitor that value realization throughout the journey, and constantly also adapt according to emerging or changing business environments. Yeah. And just to come back to that earlier quadrant, so it doesn't truly matter where you are in the quadrant. Together we will see what is the appropriate journey or roadmap for you to get to an advanced planning system. And if you are at that bottom left corner, yeah, we might have a bit of additional work to do, but if you would skip that, the success rate will just simply drop. If you are already a bit more to the top right, you have invested time in processes, in data. We might be able to start a bit later already. We will also actively guide you and ensure that the previous steps that you should have gone through were also executed in the right way. And if there are certain gaps, we will help you to address and fill those. Yeah. what I'm using here as a backbone for this story is our 7-step model. We have had already numerous webinars about that. There's also a white paper which I highly encourage you to download, and that is all already giving it, or let me put it differently, it's making it more tangible as well on what are the different steps that companies go through, and in each step what is typically required from you, from your partner to do that successfully. Okay. Maybe then to close with what I would like to just emphasize again is that no matter where you are on the quadrant, there is a way to an APS, and there is not just one route for every company to take. No, there are different routes. I would say don't just blindly select the tool and implement it. No, ensure that you know what you want to achieve, what the business outcome is that you are looking for. If you have a forest of Excels, there will be quite some complexity. So let's simplify it first. Let's ensure that there is a strong process governance in place, and then implement an APS solution that can support that. When you are selecting an APS solution, there are many out there. There are many strong ones out there who are maybe differing in certain nuances. Don't be too caught up with all the different features, but look for strong partners that can help you achieve the business outcomes, I would say. And don't treat the go live as the finish line. It's merely the start point for you to then further unlock the value of that. And how can we help as Solventure? So that journey that I just shared on the previous slide, that's how we on a day-to-day basis work with our clients. Practically speaking, now in your situation, what we can do together with you is to assess what your current process maturity is. We do that through a planning excellence scan. We can look with you to develop a value case, and it's not just going to the Gartner website and see on average what the different service level improvements and inventory turn improvements are. No, we do that based on your data in detail, and we can see how much value you can unlock. And then we can together define that roadmap that you need specifically for your company to get to that APS. And I've seen also many challenges around, we don't really know what APSs can bring. Well, if we have developed that value case together, then we can also load the specific data set in an APS solution and prove it bottom up that value can be unlocked, where we show how people can work in those systems to your planning team, that they really can see it with their own eyes and that they can live it basically. Yeah. If you would be interested to have a conversation on that, feel free to scan the QR code, and we would be happy to help you in this journey, I would say.
And maybe to add, Pieter, which just come to mind because I have been discussing this, that like one of the companies I talked to this week, their request was, okay, can you indeed help us to get more clarity on what are the different building blocks in planning, demand, rough cut planning, master planning, detailed scheduling, order management, and how will that interact? So if we can create clarity, it will help us to better understand how planning should look like in the future. I would typically call it a high-level design or a high-level architecture. And in this specific case, it was more systems-driven, and then processes and master data architectures can follow later. And next week, I will be doing a workshop with an executive leadership team also to create awareness and say, okay, if your biggest challenge is like sales and finance and the CEO are unaware, and so doing a workshop with an executive team around the supply chain triangle. So planning is not a goal in itself. Planning is only a means to an end. And then mapping the current struggles you have in the business on that supply chain triangle. I would say these are other examples on how we can help companies at the start of the journey, just to reinforce the messaging, like if you're still on Excel and you don't know where to start, there's, depending on the company situation, there's typically a different starting point. But in general, this is a topic close to our heart, and it's where our core experience lies. So we do have a lot of also material, a lot of white papers and vision papers we're happy to share with you and to discuss with you.
Yes, and I think we have time for one or two questions. So there should be a Q&A section here. So we could take one or two questions before we wrap up.
Yeah, there's one question already, Pieter. I'll leave that for you. What's your take on Power BI setup? Same warning signs as Excel?
So my first reflection is that Power BI is not that flexible as Excel. So I would say Power BI is typically centralized with a few people, and so you could come up with how should I say? You could come up with a subset of Power BI reports which are supporting a central and aligned governance process. So I would say it's not, from a flexibility perspective, comparable to Excel. What I could also add is that it's also complementary to APS solutions. So APS solutions are not there to replace your full business intelligence layer or reporting layer in the organization. APSs do have dashboarding capabilities, but that's merely to support planners to focus on the key elements and to help them find the exceptions, let's say. And it's not that if you implement an APS solution that it's also replacing the reporting layer. I would say these are coexisting and complement each other. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that we have the same warning signals there. Thank you for the question, Jens.
Other questions? So normally at the bottom, you should find a Q&A box somewhere. If not, we hope you enjoyed. Thank you for joining. And yes, as mentioned, I would say we're even looking forward to connect with you on the topic and to see how we can help you to move away from, I would say, more improvised planning solutions to more structured planning approaches, because in general, the complexity in many companies is way too big not to invest in proper planning tools. The volatility around us is much too big not to invest in proper planning tools. There's a lot of hurdles, and you've shown them. So lack of knowledge. How do I get the funding? How do I make the business case? What type of tool do I need? How do I then get the planners on board to leave their the Excel file that they constructed themselves and that they've been working with for 10 years. So there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of questions. So that being said, I believe we can close up, Pieter. I don't see extra questions coming in.
Okay, then also thank you from my side and see you next time.